The studio lights burned bright that morning, bathing the stage of the view in a golden glow. The audience was buzzing. People clutched their phones, leaning forward in their seats, ready to record a moment they might tell their friends about later. They weren't here for just anyone. They were here for a living legend. At 82 years old, Harrison Ford had been the face of adventure for generations. From Star Wars to Indiana Jones, his characters had shaped movie history. Today, he was promoting his final film as Indiana Jones, a farewell to a role he had played for decades. When he stepped onto the stage, the applause was deafening. He walked with the quiet confidence of someone who didn't need to prove anything. Dressed in a crisp navy blazer, white shirt, and dark jeans, he carried that same trademark smirk, the one audiences had fallen in love with since the 1980s. He shook hands with the co-hosts, nodded politely, and took his seat. The air in the studio felt warm, welcoming, for now. Joy Behar leaned forward in her chair, smiling in a way that seemed friendly, but there was a flicker in her eyes that hinted at something else. "Welcome, Mr. Ford," she began. "Or should I say, Grandpa Jones?" The crowd chuckled awkwardly. Some laughed, others winced. Harrison raised an eyebrow but smiled politely. "Well," he said smoothly, "age catches up to the best of us." Joy pounced. "Does it? Or are you just hanging on to relevance by dusting off the same old hat and whip? You've been playing this role since before some of our viewers were born." The laughter in the audience died instantly. Harrison folded his hands, leaning back calmly. "I like to think storytelling is timeless," he said evenly. "That's what keeps people coming back." Some of the co-hosts shifted uncomfortably, glancing between the two. But Joy didn't stop. "Or maybe," she said, tilting her head, "people come back because they're nostalgic for the old you, the one who wasn't wheezing his way through action scenes." A few gasps rose from the audience. Harrison's smile tightened, but his voice stayed calm. "I can still outrun most people my age," he replied, "and a few younger ones too." Joy smirked. "Outrun them, maybe. Outact them. Not so sure. Does your grumpy old man act really work in today's Hollywood?" Now Harrison leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "I'd say it works as long as people keep paying to see it." "And they do." A ripple of applause came from the crowd. Joy rolled her eyes. "Oh, please. That's just nostalgia talking. People don't care about your kind of movies anymore." The atmosphere shifted. The easy morning show tone was gone. Harrison crossed one leg over the other and spoke softly, almost like a warning. "I've always believed people care about stories. And from what I've seen, they still care about mine." Joy tapped her stack of note cards against the table, her voice getting harder. "Come on, Harrison. Don't you think it's time to step aside? You've had a great run, but at some point, you've got to admit, pretending to be an action hero at your age is ridiculous." Gasps rippled through the audience. Harrison blinked slowly. "Pretending? Joy, acting is pretending. That's the job. Unless you thought I was really running from boulders in my 40s. Nervous laughter broke out, but Joy's expression hardened. "Don't get cute with me, Harrison. I mean, let's be honest. These days when we watch you on screen, we're all just waiting to see if you break a hip." The laughter that followed was thin and awkward. Harrison didn't move. He kept his eyes locked on Joy, his voice low and steady. "Well, if I can keep people in suspense, that's good storytelling. I'll take that as a compliment." But Joy wasn't done. She leaned in close, almost taunting. "You've been playing the same angry, brooding man for 50 years. Everyone's too polite to tell you. It's boring now." "You're boring, Harrison." The room went dead silent. Harrison let the words hang in the air. He didn't rush to speak. He adjusted his blazer, sat up straight, and finally answered. "Boring. Maybe to you. But I've spent my life doing work I believe in. I'd rather be the man who still shows up to tell stories than the one who sits here trying to tear them down." The audience erupted, applause, cheers, even whistles. Joy tried to interject, but Harrison had already made up his mind. He stood, gave a small nod to the other hosts, and turned to the audience. "Thanks for having me," he said simply. Without looking back, Harrison Ford walked off the stage. The camera operators scrambled to follow him. The co-hosts sat frozen. Joy Behar sat in silence, her smirk gone. The tension in the studio was thick enough to feel. The bright lights glared overhead, but the warmth was gone. This wasn't the friendly morning show the audience had expected. It had turned into a verbal standoff. Joy Behar leaned forward, her voice sharp. "Don't you ever feel ashamed, Harrison? Showing up to collect a paycheck for the same role over and over." The words hit the air like a thrown knife. The room went silent. Even the cameras seemed to pause, as if they didn't want to intrude. Somewhere in the audience, a fan whispered nervously. Harrison didn't flinch. He repeated the word softly, almost as if tasting it. "Shame." He shook his head. "No, Joy. Not once. Because every time I show up, the audience shows up with me. People who grew up watching those characters, people who now bring their kids and grandkids to see them. That's worth a little gray in my hair and a few aches in my knees." Some timid applause broke out, but Joy waved it away like swatting a fly. "Please, Harrison. Stop dressing it up. You're just another overpaid movie star lucky the industry still humors you. Tell me, do you even enjoy acting anymore, or are you just addicted to the attention?" Harrison leaned forward, his voice dropping low. "You know, Joy, I didn't come here for your approval. And I definitely didn't come for your armchair analysis of my motivations. I came to talk about a film, a story my team and I poured our hearts into. But it seems you'd rather tear down the storyteller than talk about the story." Joy scoffed, loud and dismissive. "Oh, don't play the victim, Harrison. You've had more opportunities than most actors could ever dream of. But let's be honest, you're just a cranky old man clinging to the little relevance you have left." Harrison sat straighter, his eyes narrowing, but his tone stayed calm. "Maybe I am cranky. But that's because I've been around long enough to know the difference between tough questions and cruelty." This time, the audience erupted into applause, genuine, loud. Joy slammed her palm on the table to silence them. "Don't flatter yourself. You can't take criticism. That's why you'll always just be another fragile ego in Hollywood." Harrison looked down for a moment, then back up at her with a faint smile. "I've taken more criticism than you could imagine, Joy. But I've never confused cruelty with honesty." The words landed like a hammer. The other hosts sat frozen, eyes darting between them. Joy leaned back, her eyes narrowing. She realized she might have stirred something she couldn't control. But she wasn't done. She leaned forward again, fingers tapping against the glossy table. "Well," she said with a smirk, "you're always good at pretending you're unbothered. Must be useful. Playing stoic heroes while secretly terrified everyone's going to figure out you're just another old man coasting on his name." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Even the producers in the control booth exchanged worried looks. This wasn't a light-hearted segment anymore. This was a knife fight. Harrison tilted his head slightly, as if studying an insect on his sleeve. His hands stayed neatly folded. "You know, Joy," he said slowly, "you have a real talent for taking decades of work and reducing it to a single insult. Almost like that's your real craft. Not comedy. Not journalism. Just bitterness." A low murmur rolled through the audience. A few people clapped. Joy's cheeks flushed, but she forced a laugh. "Oh, that's rich. Bitterness. No. Harrison. This is honesty. You're just not used to someone telling you the truth to your face. You've been pampered so long you wouldn't recognize honesty if it punched you in the gut." Harrison arched an eyebrow. "I've been punched plenty of times, Joy. On screen and off. This doesn't even tickle." The audience chuckled, but Joy kept pressing. "You're not untouchable. You walk in here with your little smirk and soft voice, thinking you can charm your way out of anything. But here's the truth. You're not charming anymore. You're just sad." That word lingered. "Sad?" Harrison blinked once, then leaned in slightly. His voice was low, measured, but carried weight. "Sad, is it? Let me tell you what I find sad, Joy. Sad is sitting here every morning, sneering at people you've never met, mocking the things others work their whole lives to build, just so you can feel a little taller in your chair." He gestured around the table. Sad is having a platform that could inspire and uplift, and turning it into a firing squad. The audience roared, loud applause, cheers, even a few people standing. Joy opened her mouth to respond, but for the first time, she didn't seem sure what to say. Harrison sat back, calm and composed. The line had been drawn. And this time, he wasn't the one on the defensive. The other hosts, Whoopi, Sunny, and Sarah, sat completely still. Their eyes darted anywhere but at Joy. The air felt tight, like the room itself was holding its breath. But Joy wasn't done. She slammed her palm on the table, the sharp sound echoing across the set. "Oh, don't you dare lecture me, Harrison Ford," she snapped. "You think you're some kind of hero just because you memorized a few lines and swung a whip around in front of a camera. Please. You don't build anything. You don't help anyone. You just play pretend and cash massive checks while the rest of us do real work." For the first time, Harrison's calm mask slipped, just a little. He exhaled slowly, straightened in his chair, and pushed it back with a quiet scrape against the floor. Then he stood up. It wasn't loud or rushed, but when he rose, the energy in the studio shifted. He seemed taller, heavier, more solid than the air around him. "You're right," he said softly. "I do play pretend. But those stories you're mocking, they've given people hope. They've given kids heroes to look up to. They've brought families together in theaters for generations." He locked eyes with her. No blink, no flinch. "You want to talk about building something? I've built characters and worlds that will outlive both of us. I've built memories for people who will carry them for the rest of their lives. And unlike you, I don't tear people down just to feel taller. That's not work, Joy. That's just cruelty pretending to be wit." A ripple of applause moved through the audience. It wasn't hesitant this time, it was real. Joy's face hardened. "Oh, sit down, Harrison," she said with a wave of her hand. "You're being dramatic." But he didn't sit. He took a single step closer to her side of the table, his voice still quiet but sharp as glass. "Dramatic? You haven't seen dramatic yet. But keep going, Joy. I've got plenty more to say." The room felt heavy now. Even the cameras seemed to slow their movements. Joy leaned back ever so slightly, though her eyes stayed locked on him. Harrison placed both hands on the table, leaning forward just enough to match her level. "You've spent this entire interview trying to humiliate me, to chip away at me like it'll make you look strong. But all it's done is show everyone here how small you really are." He straightened up, smoothed his jacket, and looked around the studio like he'd already made his decision. "I won't be part of your circus any longer." And with that, he turned his back on her and began walking toward the studio exit. The audience reacted instantly. Some clapped, others sat frozen, whispering to each other in shock. Joy's voice shot out behind him, high and sharp. "That's right, Harrison. Walk away. That's what you do, isn't it? You run when someone finally calls you out." The words hung in the air like a bad smell. Harrison stopped. He didn't turn around at first. His right hand rested lightly on the exit door frame. Then, slowly, he turned back toward her. The lights caught his face, outlining the sharp set of his jaw. "You really don't get it, do you?" His voice wasn't angry now. It was quieter, heavier. Joy blinked, thrown off by the change in tone. "You think this is about me running?" Harrison took a few steps back toward the table, his stare fixed on her like a laser. "No, Joy. This is about me knowing when to stop playing a rigged game." He stopped just a few paces from her and spoke slowly, every word hitting like a hammer. "You've built your career on cruelty. You think sarcasm is wit. You think humiliation makes for good television. And maybe people bought it for a while. Maybe you even believed it. But all it's really done is leave you sitting in that chair every morning, tearing people down who actually built something, while you just sit there and sneer at them." The rest of the room, the crew, the other hosts, the audience, stayed completely silent. "I've spent 50 years showing up, doing the work, bringing stories to life, giving people something to feel. Maybe it was joy, maybe adventure, maybe courage when they needed it most. And sure, not everyone liked me. Not every film was perfect. But I showed up." He took one last step forward. His voice dropped even lower. "And all you've shown today, Joy, is how ugly it looks when someone stops pretending to be decent." No one moved. Harrison stood there for a second longer, looking straight at her. Then he turned again, walked to the door, and left the set, leaving the studio buzzing with applause, shock, and the heavy realization that something unforgettable had just happened. The studio had gone so still, it was as if even the cameras were afraid to move. Joy folded her arms and forced out a scoff, trying to break the tension. "You done with your little speech, movie star?" she said, her voice laced with sarcasm. A faint, humorless smile tugged at the corner of Harrison's mouth. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I'm done here. But you, Joy, you've still got to sit in that chair tomorrow. And the next day. And the day after that. You've still got to wake up every morning, look in the mirror, and pretend that what you're doing actually means something." The words landed heavy. He straightened, adjusted his jacket, and kept his eyes locked on her. "I hope one day you figure out what it feels like to build something, to create something that inspires people, instead of spending your days tearing other people down just to feel important." He let the moment hang in the air, then shook his head slightly. "I've got nothing left to say to you." Without waiting for a reply, Harrison turned and began walking toward the exit. His pace was steady, deliberate, unshaken. The audience began to murmur, then slowly broke into applause. A few people stood as he passed, clapping harder now, as if sending him off with the respect Joy had refused to show. One of the producers rushed to the door, whispering frantically, clearly trying to get him to stay. But Harrison simply raised one hand, a silent no, and kept moving. The heavy studio door swung open, and with a quiet but final click, it closed behind him. Joy was left standing alone, her expression a mix of anger and something she couldn't quite hide, shame. She stayed frozen for a moment, her jaw tight, her hands gripping the edge of the table. The other hosts exchanged awkward glances, each of them clearly deciding they didn't want to be the first to speak. The audience, too, stayed mostly silent. A few whispered to each other. Others took out their phones to capture the stunned aftermath. It felt like the air in the room was heavier than before, as if everyone was still processing what they'd just seen. Finally, Joy sat back down, still staring at the empty space where Harrison had stood moments ago. Somewhere in the control booth, a director's voice cracked through a headset, "Cut to commercial." The screen faded to black, but it was far too late to contain the damage. The moment had been caught on camera. It would be replayed on news programs, clipped for social media, analyzed by talk show hosts, and argued about online for weeks. Some would call it the day Harrison Ford ended Joy Behar's reign as the queen of daytime snark. Others would frame it as proof of how toxic television interviews had become. But there was one thing everyone seemed to agree on. That day, the man who had spent his life playing heroes walked out of the View with more dignity than the entire panel combined. And Joy was left with nothing but the sound of that door closing and the weight of her own words echoing in her mind. What do you think? Did Harrison Ford do the right thing by standing his ground and walking away? Or should he have stayed and endured the rest of the interview? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more real, unfiltered Hollywood moments like this, make sure you like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the next big showdown.